Chapter 21:17. Beautiful women's bet. Lin Feng crossed the door and appeared in an empty space with intertwining marks. There was a deployment spell pattern in front of him. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry is an interesting place. If you want to enter, you first need to activate the Celestial Deployment Plate, and then you need to break the 999 deployment spells. It is the only way to become a real member of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, mused Lin Feng to himself. His prisoners had told him this. The Celestial Deployment Plate was to test deployment spellcasters' comprehension. If they didn't have at least a basic ability to analyze deployment spells, they couldn't enter. After the Celestial Deployment Plate, there were 999 deployment spells on doors, and all cultivators had to use a deployment spell to break them. It was difficult, but it was also a good test for people who didn't have an advanced knowledge of deployment spells, as they could at least practice on them. Those were the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's requirements. If a cultivator couldn't break the door, and if they failed to do it even after a long time, then it meant they were not skilled enough and could leave. Of course, many people who joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were already strong deployment spellcasters. Many people didn't even need to make great efforts to break the door. Therefore, most people who joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were extremely talented. There were deployment marks under Lin Feng's feet. After a short time, the deployment marks turned into an authentic door which he opened. Lin Feng crossed the second door. It was easy for him, and he progressed quickly. After an hour, he had crossed 600 deployment doors. He was extremely fast. He could destroy the spells in the blink of an eye. However, the doors finally became quite complex. There were millions of marks before him. Lin Feng had the feeling he was in a maze. Even if I need some time to cross the doors, someone ordinary wouldn't even have made it here, Lin Feng reassured himself. He continued onwards, and after 4 hours he had crossed 800 doors. Inside the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, there was a gigantic peak, with 999 lights on it. More than 800 were twinkling right now, which meant someone had managed to break over 800 doors. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry could all see that mountain and those stars. Many people were staring at it. It's been a long time since someone has passed the test of the doors, said someone at that moment. I wonder whether anyone paid attention when the first light twinkled? It's been 4 hours, I noticed it the lights 3 hours after he started, said some people in the ministry. What? 4 hours to cross over 800 doors? Yao Qingshan, are you sure you saw that right? Asked someone who had doubts. Yes, 4 hours to cross over 800 doors. He could break the record. I'm sure the first light hadn't appeared 5 hours ago. When I saw the first light, there were only 9 lights or something, so initially I didn't really care, said someone else. Everybody was amazed. This cultivator was extremely strong. Those people couldn't be lying, it proved this guy was really strong. Crossing over 8 doors in 4 hours is incredible. He might finish the test in less than 10 hours. Only 500 people in the history of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry have managed to finish it in less than 10 hours. Ha, a new monstrously strong cultivator will join us, said someone loudly. In the history of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, such things happened extremely rarely. Yes, he must be extremely strong. Even now I couldn't finish it in less than 10 hours, admitted a strong cultivator. Many people nodded agreement with him. Sometimes, people who had just joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry could be stronger than them. 830 lights. Less than 10 hours, said someone. Everybody looked at the peak and frowned. How fast? Interesting, said a strong cultivator landing at the top of the peak. Only one person could stand at the top of the peak. It's Qian Nemo, he noticed, someone reported, surprised. Gu Shanqiu, how long do you think he will need? Qian Nemo asked someone who was also coming, more slowly than he had arrived. Around 10 hours. He already knows deployment spells, that's why it's easy for him. But in the end it gets complicated. Maybe he will need more than 10 hours. Maybe 8 hours will be enough. Women's voices rose, 2 more people had arrived. Yu Qingsha and Shui Luo. That guy must be a terrifying deployment spellcaster. Many people are watching him already, murmured some of the watchers below. Those people were all strong cultivators of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. It took Yi K 10 hours to finish the test. He's been the best performer in recent history. Before Yi K, among the people who are still in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry, only 2 managed to do it. If that guy wants to finish in less than 10 hours, it won't be easy for him, said Shueluo. Nothing is impossible. He could be a new talented cultivator. We'll see. Yu Qingsha smiled. I am convinced this guy will only need 8 hours to finish it. The 2 beautiful women are starting to fight, said Qianemo, smiling happily. Shueluo and Yu Qingsha were both beautiful women, and they liked to argue. They were both extremely strong, both in terms of cultivation and deployment spells, true geniuses of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. Mind your own business, said Yu Qingsha disdainfully. Let's bet. What do you think? If you're right and he finishes within 8 hours, you win, otherwise I win, said Shueluo. All right, but how can we know when he started? Replied Yu Qingsha. Let's say he started 4 hours ago. If you lose, you kiss Qianemo, said Shueluo icily. Qianmo's eyes twinkled at those words. The others were furious. She knew that Qianemo was pursuing Yu Qingsha, but she didn't like him. Yu Qingsha's eyes glittered. She looked at the gigantic peak. If you lose, you kiss the one who comes out, no matter who he is. Yu Qingsha, it could be an old man, especially if he's super talented. People could join the celestial remarkable deployment ministry at any age. Except and if he really manages to do it, then I'll help you and kill him, Qianemo said to Shueluo telepathically. Shueluo's eyes glittered and she burst into laughter. Qianemo had a high position in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. If he killed a newcomer, nobody would say anything. He was too strong and too talented, but he was cruel too. No wonder Yu Qingsha hated him. I agree, said Shueluo. Just wait then. Everybody gazed into the distance, the bet the 2 beautiful women had made attracting more and more people. They were all staring at the gigantic peak. 8 hours was too complicated. Only 100 people had managed to do that in the whole history of the ministry. Lin Feng didn't know he had drawn so many people's attention, as he didn't know people could see when someone took the test. He just crossed doors, one after another calmly. He wasn't even trying to go fast. What's going on? He's going so fast. The crowd murmured. 930 doors. Only 6 hours had passed and less than 70 doors were left. He was way too fast. 10 hours are way too much for him. Even 8 hours are too much, thought the crowd, looking at the 2 beautiful women. Qianemo was also staring at Yu Qingsha. He would be so happy to kiss her. More time passed. People surprisingly felt nervous. More and more lights were twinkling now. 980 doors. The crowd gulped. Less than 6.5 hours had passed, but the last doors were a bit more difficult. The 2 beautiful women were nervous and staring at the lights. We bet on a kiss, you better do your best, said Yu Qingsha indifferently. Shueluo looked furious. She didn't want him to succeed so quickly. When Lin Feng crossed the 990th door, people felt like their hearts were about to explode from excitement. This person was an extremely strong deployment spellcaster, maybe even a great scholar. Last 2 doors. Almost 8 hours. But if he hurries, it shouldn't be a problem. Soon, we'll know who will win the bet. 998, the last door. People's hearts were pounding. Last minutes, said Shueluo indifferently. Yu Qingsha nodded. No problem. Their hearts pounded faster and faster. Who was going to win? Who was this extraordinary person? It twinkled, proclaimed Shueluo. Qianemo was furious. Less than 8 hours. Yu Qingsha smiled indifferently and said, You lost. Chapter 21:18. Power. Shueluo knew she had lost, and looked furious. She looked at the gigantic peak as a door opened. Everybody was staring at the door. Who was going to join the celestial remarkable deployment ministry? Who had passed the test with merit? Everybody wanted to see him. None of them could do what he had done. To the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, their time was important, and 8 hours was just an unbelievable time. Finally, the door slowly opened itself, and someone appeared. He was wearing a white robe and looked handsome and clean. Lin Feng didn't try to hide his face too much. Even though the battle in Qingshan City had drawn the attention of some people of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, even if he hadn't disguised himself too much, the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry probably wouldn't recognize him. They couldn't have paid attention to someone else's disciple. However, when Lin Feng came out, he was stupefied to see that so many people were staring at him. He felt like an animal in a cage at the zoo. So many people dash? Lin Feng found he was annoyed. Why so many people? How handsome. You're lucky. Yu Qingsha looked at Xue Luo and giggled. You're lucky, he's such a handsome boy, kissing him will be a pleasure. Ask him if he accepts first, said Xue Luo icily. Yu Qingsha smiled and retorted, don't go against your promise. Who said I promised? Replied Xue Luo. Qian Emo stepped forward, staring at Lin Feng and asked indifferently, Miss Xue Luo wants to kiss you, do you want to accept or not? When Lin Feng heard that, he was surprised. Had they bet on his result? What's going on? Replied Lin Feng with equal indifference. It only took you less than 8 hours to finish the 999 deployment doors test. In the history of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, few people have managed to do that. Therefore, Xue Luo and I bet on your result. Less than 8 hours, Xue Luo had to kiss you, more than 8 hours, I had to kiss someone I hate, said Yu Qingsha, smiling thinly. Lin Feng looked amused and said to Yu Qingsha, I see. So you weren't afraid of taking that risk? I won, right? Yu Qingsha smiled. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. Those people were a bit whimsical. I asked you something. Qian Emo said coldly to Lin Feng, releasing qi to surround him. Lin Feng frowned. These people had bet on him, and he was almost lucky. A beautiful girl had to kiss him, but the best play was to refuse. He walked forwards and didn't look at Qian Emo. He hadn't come to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry to do stupid things. However, now, it was difficult to escape from the situation. Qian Emo looked at him and smiled icily. He moved and a deadly strength moved towards Lin Feng. So you had agreed secretly. Xue Luo, you can't even kiss someone, you're disappointing, said Yu Qingsha when she saw that. Lin Feng sensed a dark arm moving towards him. Explosive and ice-cold lights appeared in his eyes. He suddenly turned around and punched out explosively, qi turning into a vortex. Lin Feng's physical strength was terrifying. Even great emperors couldn't compete with him in terms of physical strength. His punches could kill great emperors. The terrifying punch moved towards Qian Mo's attack and collided with it, crackling sounds spread in the air. Dark lights invaded Lin Feng's arm, but he waved his arm and the corrosive strength instantly disappeared. Qian Emo grunted with pain. He retreated quickly, but his bones felt extremely sore. His arm was now hanging limply. What powerful strength, the crowd murmured when they saw that, staring at Lin Feng. This guy was an incredible deployment spellcaster, but he was also extremely strong and young. Even though Qian Emo isn't weak, that attack was terrifying. Surprisingly, that guy crushed his arm. How strong. What was that? Lin Feng said dismissively, as if he'd felt a raindrop. Everybody was stunned as he continued walking over to Xue Luo. Xue Luo frowned and stared at Lin Feng. He chose to do that, or you asked him? Lin Feng asked calmly. When Xue Luo heard that, she felt a sudden pressure. This young man was extremely strong. She had seen his punch. I asked him, what do you want to do about it? Xue Luo couldn't handle the pressure. She was facing this powerful man. She had to bear the responsibility. Lin Feng raised his hand. Xue Luo looked astonished and retreated quickly. However, Lin Feng followed her as fast as lightning. He tore apart the power in front of him. Xue Luo raised her arms to stop him, but the nature of the explosive clash of their auras showed her defense was being overwhelmed. Her arm was crushed. People's faces stiffened. This guy was crazy. He had just joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Was he going to destroy Qian Mo and Shui Luo? Nothing could stop Lin Feng's punches. He raised his other hand and slapped her face, without his full strength, and even then she was sent spinning away. Blood even spilled out of her mouth. Everybody remained silent. This guy was crazy. Shui Luo had been slapped by this guy. What a humiliation. Yu Qingsha was astonished too. She hadn't anticipated this guy would be so strong and aggressive. Lin Feng stared at her and said icily, "You bet on me, you lost and tried to fight me? I would have never kissed you anyway. You're cheap and dirty." Lin Feng slowly turned around and walked towards Yu Qingsha, smiling at her. Yu Qingsha was surprised. Did he want to fight with her? The crowd was watching him closely. Lin Feng smiled thinly and said, "Since you bet with her and she lied to you, you can come along." He reached her and smiled. Kissing a beauty is a pleasure. Yu Qingsha was startled, but she smiled and said, "Since you don't want to kiss Shui Luo, you won't like my kiss either." "Wrong, I like you," said Lin Feng, giving her a knowing smile. Yu Qingsha's heart started pounding. If she refused, would he punch and slap her too? Not only did that guy humiliate Shui Luo, but now he also wants to kiss Yu Qingsha. The crowd was speechless. Yu Qingsha looked at Lin Feng's smile and giggled. "Since it's that way, I'll kiss you." Then she walked forwards and put her lips on Lin Feng's. They kissed in a gentle and soft way. It even looked passionate. Many of the men watching were stunned, envious, and jealous. After kissing, Yu Qingsha turned around and left, smiling as she said, "I'll remember that kiss." Lin Feng watched her go calmly. There were 81 buildings in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. It was extremely vast. Lin Feng walked away. That guy is strong, however, people won't let him off here. He humiliated Qian Mo and Shui Luo, some people muttered. And Yu Qingsha, he forced her to kiss him. He offended many people already, he's audacious. Many people expressed their opinions about Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't care. He was there already, he couldn't help but sigh, wondering how many geniuses came from this place. Chapter 21:19 10,000 Deployment Walls Pattern. Lin Feng's eyes glittered as he gazed into the distance. He thought to himself, the 10,000 Deployment Walls pattern is one of the treasures of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and there are only two ways to get in. One is to rely on one's own strength to enter the 81 ministry buildings under the jurisdiction of the 9 ministry sects and become a direct disciple. The second one is to survive a 10,000 killings great deployment spell and then you can immediately enter it. Those were the rules of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. To see the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's treasure, there was no quick and easy solution. A cultivator had to be a strong deployment spellcaster to gain the right. If they were strong enough, they could pass the 999 Doors challenge and join the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, but accessing the rest of the resources wasn't that easy. The 10,000 Deployment Walls pattern was one of the treasures of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. In order to access it, the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had to either acknowledge a disciple's strength, or the disciple had to risk their life. Yi Kei had told Lin Feng that the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell contained 10,000 deployment spells. They were all deadly. No matter what the cultivator's cultivation level was, passing that test was extremely difficult, especially that the higher one's cultivation level was, the more difficult the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell challenge was. In the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, people who managed to pass that challenge were extremely rare. Lin Feng arrived in a vast place. He slowly rose up into the air and punched the sky, hand imprints appearing. He kept rising higher in the air. Finally, the sky shook and golden lights filled the sky, as if a door had been opened. Inside the 81 ministry buildings, many people looked at the sky and frowned. Someone wants to take the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge. The 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry is a fusion of 10,000 deadly deployment spells. It's been a long time since anyone has managed to pass the test. People rose up into the air and surrounded Lin Feng, staring at him. Yu Qingsha was there too, and when she saw him, she was stupefied. This guy wanted to sit the 10,000 killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge? No wonder his deployment spells were so powerful. What a terrifying guy. He had just joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry and he already wanted to sit that test? Lin Feng entered the empty space and lights surrounded him. The golden lights turned into a cloud and condensed into a deadly strength. How formidable! Lin Feng followed the deadly golden path into the empty space and quickly disappeared. The 10,000 killings Great Deployment spell closed itself after he entered. After a short time, more silhouettes gathered. It's him! He just passed the 999 doors test in less than 8 hours. He broke one of Qian Mo's arms, slapped Xue Luo's face, and now he wants to sit the 10,000 killings Great Deployment spell test. How strong! He even humiliated Xue Luo. Qian Mo and Xue Luo are members of the 9 main ministry buildings. They won't let him off, thought many people. Qian Mo and Xue Luo were fellow disciples, members of one of the 9 main ministry buildings. There were many strong cultivators there, and the strongest ones were extremely strong. They would probably help Xue Luo and Qian Mo deal with Lin Feng. Many people didn't know what Lin Feng wanted to do. He was in the deployment lights and millions of lights were surrounding him. A terrifying deadly chi surrounded him. Deadly deployment spell. Lin Feng raised his head and saw millions of arrows move towards him. Those arrows could easily pose a threat to a high-level emperor. However, Lin Feng was quite calm as he walked forwards unhurriedly. The arrows crashed onto his body, but his physical body was too solid and resistant. Lin Feng continued walking forwards. After the arrows, a rain of fireballs started. They were scorching hot. Around Lin Feng's body, an armor made of demon and earth cosmic energies appeared. A terrifying strength moved towards him, golden deployment lights in the form of a sword. Lin Feng punched it and destroyed it. However, as he continued walking forwards, a dagger made of lights descended from the sky towards him. Lin Feng calmly punched it as well, and instantly destroyed it. Lin Feng was walking slowly. None of the attacks posed a threat to him. However, he was more and more intrigued as time passed. How enigmatic! Each time he took a step, a deadly attack was awaiting him. Those deadly deployment spells were all kinds of strange things. There was no pattern to them. All this was the 10,000 killings Great Deployment spell. The strong cultivator who had cast it was probably a great deployment master. He could cast probably mighty deployment spells in the blink of an eye. Even though Lin Feng was particularly relaxed and didn't feel any pressure at all, it was precisely because his physical strength had reached the strength of the top of the Huang Qi layer. Ordinary cultivators of the top of the Huang Qi layer couldn't do anything against him. Otherwise, if an ordinary emperor had come in, they would have died almost instantly. Especially to those attacks which blotted out the sky and covered the earth, it was basically impossible to dodge them. Of course, there was another possibility. If a cultivator's deployment spells were extremely powerful, they could use them to resist the 10,000 killings Great Deployment spell. Lin Feng continued walking forwards and noticed some impressive deployment marks shooting towards him. Deployment spells fell from the sky one after another. Lin Feng didn't stop at all though. Those deployment spells couldn't make Lin Feng stop for even a second. He was just a passenger there. At his back were 80 ancient swords. A terrifying sword intent filled the air around him. When Lin Feng had the impression an attack could threaten his physical body, he used them. If the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had known that he was walking in such a calm way, they would have been astonished and speechless. In millions of years, only one person like him had appeared, precisely because of his physical strength. Most of the deployment spells couldn't affect him at all. He didn't even need to block them. Therefore, Lin Feng didn't waste his energy. People from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry thought that the 10,000 killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge was extremely difficult, but Lin Feng finished it easily. When he finished, he appeared in a mountain dwelling, the room calm and dark. There were 10 passages in there. 9 of them led to the 9 main ministry buildings. Lin Feng used the 10th one, the one leading to the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. A wall appeared in front of him, the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. That wall looked alive. It contained an endless amount of deployment spells. Each mark was mysterious and evolved differently. One of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry's treasures, the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. An imprint appeared in Lin Feng's third eye, the word Earth appeared. 9 Supreme Ministries, Earth Ministry imprint. Outsiders, even if they passed the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge, could only watch that wall, but only disciples of the 9 Supreme Ministries could use that imprint to enter the wall. Therefore, Lin Feng used that imprint to enter the wall, and let it surround him. It was an empty space inside the wall. In front of him, an old man was carving deployment marks. His deployment spell was changing. One of them turned into a firebird, moving as fast as lightning. The next one moved slower, a great rock appeared and also flew away, accompanied by whistling sounds. It looked neither real nor fake. How strong! His animal deployment spells are great. That old man is an incredible great scholar, thought Lin Feng. He sat down cross-legged there and studied the old man's movements. He forgot about everything else in the world, solely focusing on the old man. As Lin Feng studied the old man's movements, he didn't forget to apply the Celestial Evolution Holy Scriptures to the deployment spells. He had to understand and adapt things to his own condition. He couldn't learn stupidly by heart without thinking about what he was doing, including in terms of deployment spells. The great deployment spells kept transforming. With the power of the mind, Lin Feng realized he understood some things he had never understood before. He now understood deployment spell strength in a different way. It was a new territory. Lin Feng spent 7 days there before leaving. He went to another empty space. There was a middle-aged man there carving deployment marks. His deployment marks were weapons, destructive and deadly. His hand looked like a sword and he kept condensing deployment swords made of cosmic energies. At the same time, he created weapons using deployment spells. Lin Feng continued studying. All sorts of cosmic energies used to carve different deployment marks. Lin Feng spent some time there. Many people were talking about him in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Some people guessed he had died during the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge because many people came to the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge place and didn't find Lin Feng. He still hadn't come out after so many days, so many people guessed he had died in there. Nobody could imagine that he had stolen Yi Kei's memories, had passed the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge, and was now studying deployment spells there. Chapter 2120. Trying deployment spells. The 10,000 deployment walls pattern had 10,000 deployment spells, all different from the 3,000 great deployment spells Lin Feng had obtained long ago. It was like another territory. Lin Feng focused on deployment spells during those days. Lin Feng was seated cross-legged. There was no strong cultivator in front of him, he was alone. He was studying the modified version of the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. The 10,000 deployment walls pattern has 10,000 deployment spells. There are all sorts of deployment spells. I've been here for more than 40 days, I can't study all of them. If I controlled the 10,000 deployment walls pattern, it would be much better, thought Lin Feng with a sigh. Unfortunately, the 10,000 deployment walls pattern was one of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's treasures, and with his current strength, he couldn't understand them. Lin Feng wanted to study more, but he needed to go to Godly Cloud City. Even though there was still time before the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, it was some distance away. He didn't know what would happen on the way either. He couldn't miss this chance. He preferred being early and having enough time to get prepared. Therefore, he stopped studying. He had already learned a great deal. He already understood 2 kinds of deployment spells. He hoped he could get them to fuse together to make his deployment spells even stronger. Lin Feng had spent many days in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell and hadn't come out yet. People from the 9 Supreme Ministries hadn't seen him. A potentially famous disciple of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had vanished without trace. Everybody thought it was a pity. Someone came out of the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. When he saw nobody was there, he left, merging with the wind. He opened the door and departed. In the central part of the 81 normal ministries, a silhouette fell from the sky. People frowned, especially when they saw the person zipping away. Who is that person? Someone turned around and saw Lin Feng leaving swiftly. Let's go and see, said someone, chasing after him. Yi Kei was imprisoned in Lin Feng's small world. He had learned a lot from him and could already travel freely in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. He moved at eye-blurring speed without stopping. After a short time, he arrived in a place with a mysterious deployment area. It was extremely vast with many deployment stones. It was a famous place for the ministries, who practiced deployment spells there. There were over 100 deployment spell testing places there. Many people were trying different deployment spells. Many people from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry came there often to practice. The strongest deployment spellcasters rarely came there, because the other disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry wouldn't have dared come if the strongest ones were there, since their deployment spells were too powerful. After Lin Feng arrived, many marks appeared under his feet. At the same time, he released a hurricane of cosmic energies. Lin Feng had an advantage over many people in terms of deployment spells because he controlled many cosmic energies. In the blink of an eye, dozens of cosmic energies hummed about him and formed swiftly. Illusion intent filled the air. It was made of empty space strength which Lin Feng turned into golden illusions. They were dimly discernible and yet dazzling at the same time. Many people noticed that. Golden cosmic energy which turns into illusion deployment spells? Those already present frowned. They were stupefied. Which supreme ministry was this guy from? In the illusion deployment spell, Lin Feng chopped down, and music spread in the air, turning into a sword halberd and disappearing into an empty space. Whistling wind. Lin Feng moved his hand again. The wind roared out with hollow thunder. There were many marks in the air, as the hurricane condensed. However, Lin Feng attacked the empty space, and the hurricane became invisible and intangible. Deployment spells can mean anything. I just understand the basics. So-called great deployment masters must be as strong as saints, thought Lin Feng. He wasn't proud that he had been in the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. He had just learned that he didn't know enough. He realized his deployment spell knowledge was extremely low. Lin Feng kept moving his hands. Deployment marks kept intertwining. On the deployment spell testing site, many people noticed him and heard the sounds emitted by his attacks. Some people frowned and looked at him sharply. Who's that deployment spellcaster? Asked someone, looking at Lin Feng. I don't know. Surprisingly, he's disturbing everyone. Interesting. Let's go and see how people will deal with him, thought some people excitedly, and flew towards Lin Feng. Be careful. That guy dares interrupt everyone. He must be extremely strong. He condenses cosmic energies to create his deployment spells. We can't see inside. He's a very skilled deployment spellcaster. Yes, let's stay together and see, agreed three people entering the deployment spell. Are you here? After entering the golden empty space, they couldn't see one another anymore. How come you're so far away? Replied one of them at that moment. Oh no, whispered the third one at that moment. Some powerful force filled the air, the sounds painfully piercing through their ears. They were having auditory hallucinations. A strong wind started blowing. That person pulled a long face. He waved his hands and his eyes lit up with light. He looked around at the empty space deployment marks. There were a great number of deployment marks. He condensed the strength of the earth and sky to react. If he could see the marks, he could destroy the deployment spell. However, when he saw the deployment marks, he had the sensation he was being paralyzed. What kind of deployment marks were those? They kept changing. He could only see them for a few seconds before they changed. What a powerful deadly wind strength. The man's face turned deathly pale. He was hurled away with rolling thunder as it struck him. The marks on the ground kept intertwining and turned into walls. I lost. Stop, said a voice in Lin Feng's mind. The three cultivators were expelled from the deployment spell and crashed onto the ground. Their clothes were ripped apart, their bodies riddled with bleeding wounds. How do you feel? The cultivators glanced at one another. They were all shocked. What a powerful deployment spell. How dangerous. In the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, only around 30 people can cast such formidable deployment spells. I think not more 20 actually. I didn't even understand those deployment marks. There were so many colors and patterns. Who's the deployment spell caster? I don't know. I didn't see clearly. Many people started to make fun of them, they didn't believe them. They immediately entered the deployment spell and very quickly, they realized those 3 people were right. They were also hurled ignominiously out of the spell. Indeed, this guy was a very powerful deployment spell caster. More and more people tried, and in the end, they were all forced out. It drew many people's attention. Lin Feng was calmly studying deployment spells and modifying them according to his needs. Deployment spells represented extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. He just had to think of something and he could make it. Nothing was impossible. Therefore, Lin Feng had completely changed. He didn't adhere strictly to formalities anymore. He made the deployment spells change constantly. He had the sensation that he was evolving on the path of deployment spells. After this, he intended to leave the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. He had studied the 10,000 deployment walls pattern, and it had been really helpful. 3 more days passed, and during those 3 days, nobody dared attack that deployment spell. Lin Feng kept on changing it. Qian Mo and Shui Luo are here too? Someone saw 2 people arrive, Qian Mo and Shui Luo from the Li ministry. They were both extremely strong. However, they didn't intervene. They just stayed in the distance and observed. It's Xie Mao. Someone frowned when they saw that person. Xie Mao had surprisingly come personally. His eyes looked strange and evil. Everybody knew how dangerous he was in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. He was one of the strongest disciples of the whole ministry. Just like Yi Kei, some people considered him an emperor who had no enemy at the same level. So many people are here. The people looked around and realized there were many strong cultivators from the 81 normal ministries, and even from the 9 supreme ministries, including Xie Mao from the Li ministry. The news that an incredible deployment spellcaster had appeared had already spread through the whole ministry. Chapter 21-21. Nobody can break it. Who's the one trying deployment spells? Xie Mao gazed into the distance with his strange and evil eyes. He looked indifferent, calm and aloof, yet dignified and majestic. I'm not sure, but his deployment spells are extremely powerful, replied someone. Xie Mao frowned. Someone has been testing out deployment spells for a few days, and nobody knows who it is? What makes his deployment spells so powerful? Asked Xie Mao. The deployment marks intertwine perfectly. Xie Mao nodded and smiled at the crowd. People from all the ministries are here. Who wants to go and see who that guy is? Brother Xie Mao, the Li ministry is the most powerful. You should go into the deployment spell and see, someone urged him. If I go into it and destroy it, you won't see what makes that deployment spell so powerful, replied Xie Mao calmly. Everybody shivered. Many people had tried to go into that deployment spell, and they had all been thrown out of it. They hadn't even understood what was happening. It contained all sorts of energies. If the deployment spellcaster hadn't been merciful, they would have died. Therefore, people who weren't extremely strong didn't want to go into it. Weaker people didn't want to lose face, but they still wanted to see how the 9 supreme ministries would take care of the issue. The supreme ministries can send 2 people each. What do you think? Said Xie Mao to some strong cultivators from supreme ministries calmly. The competition between the supreme ministries was ongoing, as always. I don't mind, answered someone neutrally. I agree too, responded other members of the supreme ministries. Xie Mao looked at Qian Mo and said, Qian Mo, Shui Luo, your deployment spells are extremely powerful. You can probably break it. Xie Mao knew that Qian Mo had been humiliated by someone who had crushed his arm. Everybody made fun of him in the supreme ministries. Now, he was being given an opportunity to regain face. If he managed to break the deployment spell, people would stop making fun of him. Xie Mao had been humiliated even more. She had been slapped in the face and driven away. Everybody knew what Xie Mao meant. Yu Qing was in the same position. Even though she hadn't gone through something too bad, that guy had forced her to kiss him. It was nothing glorious. 8 people from 4 different ministries entered the deployment spell. Qian Mo and Shui Luo immediately attacked when they entered, deployment lights intertwining and surrounding them. Powerful cosmic energies condensed and absorbed everything around them. Qian Mo and Shui Luo were nervous, nearly paralyzed with sudden fear as their faces turned deathly pale. They sensed the danger coming from all around them, but they couldn't see anything, so they didn't know where to attack. "Everybody, attack at the same time and mess up the deployment marks," shouted Qian Mo extremely loudly. Terrifying sounds spread in the air and pierced through their eardrums painfully. The sounds were distorted and sharp. The sounds grew sharper and sharper. Qian Mo had the impression he was going to die. He didn't feel safe at all, and the strength kept increasing. Drops of cold sweats fell onto the ground. The ground started shaking. Qian Mo was overwhelmed by the fear. He couldn't stand it anymore and shouted furiously, "I surrender, take me out of the deployment spell." "Piss off," answered a voice icily. Qian Mo sensed a strong wind brush against him. He furiously condensed strength to block it, but an explosive strength hurled him away. The terrifying deadly energies were getting closer and closer to him. Qian Mo had the impression he was going to die. He ran away, but he couldn't see the outside world when he was in the illusion. It felt like the earth and sky were about to collapse on him. "Piss off." More strength condensed as thunder rumbled. 2 more people were hurled away. A hurricane surrounded them and smashed down. Qian Mo crashed weakly to the ground. "It's you. You just attacked me." Qian Mo and Shui Luo looked at each other, stupefied. They were speechless. They looked back at the deployment spell. A short time after, Yuqing Sha and another man were hurled outside of the deployment spell as well. They also looked stupefied. "What's going on?" Xie Mao asked Qian Mo and Xie Mao, frowning unhappily. "This guy's deployment spell is too powerful, we can't break it," stated Qian Mo, ashamed. He couldn't break it and he couldn't stay inside. He wasn't defiant at all. "It's a great scholar, he's terrifyingly strong," Xie Mao declared. People who had been in the deployment spell before and had failed just smiled icily. They knew how strong that deployment spell was. They hadn't managed to break it either. If Xie Mao and his friends couldn't break it, nobody could. Could it be Yi Ke? Maybe he's back? Wondered Xie Mao aloud. He had heard that Yi Ke had been traveling. Maybe he had come back and was trying out deployment spells. Maybe he was deliberately mystifying? "That deployment spell doesn't look like a deployment spell Yi Ke could cast," disagreed Qian Mo. Xie Mao nodded. He walked forwards and entered the deployment spell. Many people were startled. Xie Mao was a great scholar. He had an advanced understanding of deployment spells. People who weren't great scholars couldn't understand his deployment spells. Besides, he also had a special kind of strength. He was definitely able to destroy this deployment spell. After Xie Mao entered the deployment spell, the same thing which had happened to Qian Mo and Shui Luo happened to him. His eyes turned black and white and grew larger and larger. A vortex appeared before him. He could see through everything. Everything in front of him turned black and white. "Empty deployment spell, interesting," said Xie Mao passively. The qi was extremely powerful, but it was just an empty deployment spell. Qian Mo had probably not even noticed that. He had just been terrified. Xie Mao slowly walked forwards, looking relaxed. He didn't attack at all. After a short time, he laughed to himself. The illusion deployment spell is the basic foundation, and inside there are many invisible and intangible deadly deployment spells. What a powerful deployment spell. Whistling sounds spread in the air. Xie Mao jumped away as some strength moved towards him. He punched out in the direction of the invisible and intangible strength. "Chaos!" shouted Xie Mao icily. The whole deployment spell was filled with a terrifying qi. Wind, fire, thunder and all kinds of strength moved towards Xie Mao. He smiled coldly. His qi pulsed around him. He waved his hands. Deployment marks started intertwining and turned into an invisible and intangible curtain which moved towards the incoming strength. He wanted to destroy the deployment spell using a deployment spell. There was an explosion at the collision. Xie Mao sensed that a new kind of strength was condensing again. It was even more terrifying than the previous strength. The strength kept increasing in power. Xie Mao looked surprised and frowned. However, the endless strength forced him to be more defensive. His attacks were very powerful, so he didn't fear the attacks from the deployment spell, but his defense wasn't as terrifying as Lin Feng's. He couldn't endure the attacks with his physical body, it would have been too risky. Outside, the crowd watching the deployment spell saw a gigantic dark dragon appear, a dragon of death. It could absorb any kind of strength. The death intent it contained shook them to their cores. The whole deployment spell turned black. They hadn't thought that the deployment spell would change this much because of Xie Mao. The gigantic dragon spat out strength, and death chi filled the air. After a short time, the crowd saw a silhouette appear. He was hurled violently out of the deployment spell, his body all black. He looked dead. People's faces stiffened. They were staring at the deployment spell and gulped down. They only realized how terrifying the deployment spell was and how it had changed after this. Phew, Xie Mao took a deep breath. He slowly stood up and used life chi to recover. His face was still black, and one could see he was still scared speechless. Xie Mao almost got killed in the deployment spell. It's extremely powerful. Someone in the crowd whispered. Who are you? Please show yourself, said Xie Mao. He couldn't think of anyone who could cast such terrifying deployment spells. Was it one of his fellow disciples of the Di Qi layer? But his fellow disciples of the Di Qi layer hadn't come to the testing area. Xie Mao. In the distance, someone came up slowly. He was tall and composed. When he showed up, everybody was astonished. A great emperor of the Li ministry. Brother Z, replied Xie Mao politely, nodding at the new arrival. It was a very strong cultivator of the Li ministry, a great emperor. It's been a long time since the 9 supreme ministries of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry have seen such a terrifying deployment spellcaster. Please show yourself, Your Excellency, said Great Emperor Z solemnly, looking at the deployment spell. Chapter 21-22, Great Emperor Z. When the crowd heard Great Emperor Z, they stared at the deployment spell. Xie Mao had almost died in there. How powerful was this spell? Who had cast it? Everybody wanted to know. At that moment, the illusion slowly dispersed. Very quickly, a silhouette appeared. It was Lin Feng. When Lin Feng appeared, many people frowned in astonishment. It's him. Surprisingly, that guy isn't dead. Qian Mo and Xue Luo's faces paled. They had hoped Brother Xie Mao would be able to help them fight against Lin Feng, but later they had thought he had died in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell, so they had slowly started to forget about him. However, Lin Feng wasn't dead, he was standing in front of them. Not only hadn't he died, but his deployment spell had almost killed Xie Mao. Qian Mo and Xue Luo felt ashamed. They had bet on Lin Feng. In their eyes, Lin Feng was just a new member of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. They hadn't thought he'd be so strong. They could just look down upon him. Even Xie Mao couldn't compete with him. Yu Qingsha was astonished too and pulled a long face. This guy was so strong. His deployment spells were powerful. He hadn't just become a great scholar, he was an experienced great scholar. Who is he? Xie Mao asked Qian Mo coldly when he saw that so many people looked shocked. He's the one who passed the door's test in less than 8 hours. I thought he died in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell, Qian Mo replied telepathically. His face stiffened. Xie Mao frowned and stepped forwards. He said to Lin Feng icily, You didn't die in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell? Why would have I died in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell? Replied Lin Feng. Great Emperor Z said indifferently, Xie Mao, this guy's deployment spells are formidable. You think the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell could kill him? Be respectful. Xie Mao was startled at the rebuke and looked ashamed. Indeed, with the power of his deployment spells, how could he have died in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell? But Xie Mao just couldn't believe his eyes. I went to the 10,000 deployment walls pattern a few times, but I didn't see you. Where were you? I am not a direct disciple of the Supreme Ministries, so I can't go into the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. Staying outside would have been useless. So I just stayed in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell and studied there. Is that surprising? Replied Lin Feng. He had already anticipated someone would ask him that question, so he had an answer ready. His answer was, after all, the truth. If someone couldn't enter the pattern, not bad. But with your talent, you should go into the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. If you wish, I can inform the teachers and they'll recruit you as a disciple. They'll give you a memory imprint which will prove your social status, and you will be able to go to the 10,000 deployment walls pattern anytime. It will help you a lot. What do you think? Great Emperor Z smiled. Those crowd were astonished at the offer. Great Emperor Z was a genius and a great emperor of the Li ministry. When he saw geniuses, he hoped they could join the Li ministry. He wanted to help Lin Feng. He didn't feel jealous or envious at all. Xie Mao's eyes glittered. Lin Feng hadn't been in the 10,000 deployment walls pattern? If he had, he would have been even more fearsome. If Lin Feng joined the Li ministry, it would have a negative impact on Xie Mao's social position within the Li ministry. He had a different position from Great Emperor Z. He was still an emperor. He was the strongest and most talented emperor of the Li ministry, and always obtained the best resources. People admired him. If Lin Feng joined the Li ministry, that would change. But since Great Emperor Z was saying this, Xie Mao couldn't intervene. We'll see, replied Lin Feng calmly. Great Emperor Z was startled, but smiled oddly. Does that mean you refuse? Lin Feng looked at the man. A great emperor, a genius, ambitious and proud, personally inviting him to join the Li ministry, but Lin Feng refused and didn't give him face. Even though Great Emperor Z didn't release any qi, the atmosphere became oppressive around him. Kind of, answered Lin Feng indifferently. The atmosphere grew particularly silent. This guy is talented, but he's also ambitious and proud. Great Emperor Z invited him personally and he refused. He could have joined a supreme ministry without taking any test, and surprisingly he refused. No wonder Great Emperor Z is furious, thought the crowd. Great Emperor Z is a nice person and cares for the Li ministry. However, he's not nice to his enemies. Even the members of the other supreme ministries fear him. He hates evil people and evil things, murmured someone. Great Emperor Z smiled casually and looked at Lin Feng. Do you think you're too talented for the Li ministry? I'm just not used to it, said Lin Feng indifferently. He didn't want to stay in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry or become one of their disciples. Inside his spirit world, he had some cultivators from the celestial remarkable deployment ministry whom he was going to transform into demon puppets. I see. I won't force you then, but your deployment spells are incredible. Please show me how strong your deployment spells are for you to refuse the Li ministry's invitation, said Great Emperor Z, his smile now cold. He stepped forwards, deployment marks glittered all around him. The crowd hastily retreated. They didn't wait to see anything anymore, they all ran away. Only Lin Feng and Great Emperor Z remained. Those people knew how terrifyingly strong Great Emperor Z was. At that moment, the ground under Great Emperor Z grew dark and fissures appeared. It became scorching hot. No fire had appeared yet, but the temperature was increasing. Great Emperor Z is incredibly strong. Even though that guy's deployment spells are powerful, Great Emperor Z will teach him a good lesson. People murmured. Lin Feng moved away, marks appearing under his feet. They seemed to be made of earth strength and looked indestructible. Great Emperor Z grunted icily and stepped forwards again, fire suddenly appearing and the air starting to burn. Lin Feng was surrounded by fire. What a powerful fire qi, thought Lin Feng. His opponent was strong, with powerful cosmic energies. He also understood Dao strength, or his social position couldn't have been that high within the Li ministry. The difference between great emperors who understood Dao strength and the others was gigantic. Lin Feng condensed cosmic energies around himself. Marks filled the air. Demon and earth strength condensed and surrounded his body like his clothes. Great Emperor Z stretched out his hands and his terrifying fire strength turned into 9 fire dragons, charging towards Lin Feng to devour him. Embers kept exploding and fiery lights appeared. Lin Feng jumped away and waved his hands. Lights glittered. Lin Feng released sword intent, fusing it together with his strength and turning it into gigantic swords. They shot towards the 9 dragons. Great Emperor Z just smiled icily and continued stepping forwards, the firestorm around him getting more and more ferocious as he kept forming hand seals. The fire blotted out the sky and swooped towards Lin Feng. It was like he had ended up in a volcano, a world with flames everywhere. Purple lights also appeared, they looked like spiritual beings within the flames. Lin Feng's armor shook. He drifted backwards, trying to leave the fire world deployment spell, but Great Emperor Z shouted furiously, his silhouette flickering as he turned into many illusions. A hand smashed towards Lin Feng's armored chest. People's hearts were twitching. Was Lin Feng going to die? Crackling sounds spread in the air. Lin Feng flew away, his armor was broken, fire marks appeared on it, and finally they moved onto Lin Feng's skin. Lin Feng lowered his head, everybody was staring at him. Could Lin Feng still move normally after that attack? Lin Feng raised his head and smiled at Great Emperor Z icily. Your Excellency, your Tao is the Tao of fire. Everybody frowned. This guy was extremely strong. After Great Emperor Z's attack, he could still act normally, as if nothing had happened. Great Emperor Z stared at him strangely, then he smiled and said, "You're acting as if nothing had happened even though my attack was powerful. That's rare. Unfortunately, you don't want to join the Li Ministry, I won't force you then." The deployment spells faded away as Great Emperor Z left. A short time later, Great Emperor Z landed on a mountain just before reaching the Li Ministry. There were some people around him, all looking at Lin Feng in the distance. That guy is an incredible genius. His deployment spells are truly impressive. If he wants to stay in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, but doesn't want to join the Li Ministry, it would be a pity. However, if he doesn't want to stay in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry and doesn't join one of the 81 ministries, kill him, said Great Emperor Z calmly. The people around him frowned in astonishment. Chapter 21-23, Gone Ministry's Paradise. When Lin Feng saw Great Emperor Z leave, his silhouette also flickered as he left. After a short time, Lin Feng landed on a mountain and coughed up some scorching hot qi. His face was red. Great Emperor Z is a great emperor, and a scary one. He's not an ordinary cultivator, he understands Tao. His deployment spells are also terrifying, and so is his fire Tao. How formidable, thought Lin Feng. He sat down cross-legged and gradually got rid of the fire in his organs. That punch had been deadly, and its explosive fire strength had penetrated into his body. Luckily, his physical body was extremely powerful. Any other emperor at the top of the Huang Qi layer would have burned to death. After a short time, a silhouette flickered and landed next to Lin Feng. They said nothing though, simply gazing into the distance and calmly waiting there. Lin Feng rid himself of the fire strength in his body and looked at the man. He asked calmly, "What do you want?" "You refused Great Emperor Z's invitation?" The man turned around and asked calmly. "So what?" replied Lin Feng. "You don't know about Great Emperor Z's temper. He cares a lot about the Li Ministry. When he has enemies, he tries to get rid of them. You humiliated Shui Luo and Qian Mo, and you nearly killed Xie Mao with your deployment spell. If you had joined the Li Ministry, he would have taken care of you, but you refused, and if you don't become a disciple of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, Great Emperor Z will. You mean that I must join the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry?" "No, I'm just telling you. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry doesn't force people to become disciples. They don't lack geniuses. However, you are extremely powerful. The Gone Ministry is one of the 9 supreme ministries. If you join us, Great Emperor Z will act as if nothing had happened," said that young man calmly. He had indeed come in peace. "Aren't you worried that I could obtain resources and then leave?" Lin Feng smiled. The other man smiled calmly. "That's your own business." "I will think about it," Lin Feng offered. "I hope so," the other replied calmly. His silhouette flickered and he was gone. Lin Feng closed his eyes in thought. That man didn't seem to want to deceive him. Lin Feng had the sensation some people seemed to be watching him. I wonder if Great Emperor Z has sent people to watch me. It seems that if I want to leave the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, it won't be easy, thought Lin Feng calmly. He started using the Celestial Evolution Holy Scriptures to modify deployment spells. Cosmic energies appeared, wind and empty space cosmic energies fused together and deployment marks appeared. This deployment spell looked special. It was a pair of wings. I made wings using a deployment spell, thought Lin Feng. The wings had appeared on his back. He opened them up, and a strong wind started blowing furiously past him with a long howling. Empty space strength filled the air as Lin Feng kept modifying his wings. Deployment spells represented extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. Nothing was impossible, it was always possible to modify them. Before, Lin Feng had practiced the 3,000 great deployment spells and countless small deployment spells. Even though they were powerful, they lacked something, vigor and vitality. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's deployment spells were powerful and could be used like strength. As long as someone was persevering and talented, nothing was impossible. Lin Feng's ideas of deployment spells were fixed at the beginning. He had learned more about them thanks to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. He started modifying them as he wished, adapting them to his needs. They made him intrinsically stronger. Those who were watching Lin Feng had a strange feeling. He was extremely strong and talented and had joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, but he wasn't in a hurry to join one of the 81 ministries. He wasn't even interested in the 9 supreme ministries. He had come purely for deployment spells, it seemed. Great Emperor Z's methods were cruel, but one had to admit what he was doing wasn't groundless. Since such a powerful deployment spellcaster had appeared, if they couldn't use him, then they had to eliminate him. It was cruel and straightforward, but that was the sad truth of the cultivation world. They were convinced that a few great emperors could easily kill Lin Feng. Of course, they also hoped that Lin Feng would be interested in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry and would join a supreme ministry. Any of them was acceptable. At that moment, the sky distorted. People raised their heads and gazed into the distance. Clouds appeared and a strong wind started blowing. Qi filled the air. All the disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, get ready to go into the Gone Ministry's paradise, proclaimed a loud voice, heard everywhere in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. They're going to open the Gone Ministry's paradise for everybody. What's going on? The Gone Ministry wants to open the Gone Ministry's paradise and wants everyone to go in there? I guess they want to get ready for the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. Imagine, we are ordinary disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Even if we go to the Gone Ministry's paradise and we're lucky, we'd never be able to participate. The geniuses will participate, not us. But some people will be lucky and will go to Godly Cloud City and participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. They'll make the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry famous. You're right. It's probably because of that, for those geniuses to get ready to go and participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. After that voice resonated everywhere in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, many people started talking as they headed towards the Gone Ministry's paradise. The Gone Ministry was the first of the 81 ministries. The Gone Ministry's paradise was an ancient paradise small world created by the ancestors of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. It was said that it was a place where great deployment masters could practice cultivation. Even the Gone Ministry's disciples rarely had occasion to go there. Today, it was open to all, a rare opportunity, something that might happen only once every 100 years. Lin Feng, who had spent some time in his spirit's world, opened his eyes. He knew the ministry was calling them to the Gone Ministry's paradise. Since everyone from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry was told to go there, could he go or not? He wasn't a member of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, after all. When Lin Feng thought about that, his silhouette flickered and he followed the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's disciples regardless. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had existed for so many years, it was like a university. There were millions of disciples here. Lin Feng was in the crowd. Nobody really cared about him in the ocean of people. The members of the 81 ministries could hardly all know one another. There was what seemed like an endless number of low-level emperors. There was no limit of strength to be recruited by the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. They cared about deployment spells, and those who could pass the 999 Doors challenge could become disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Of course, apart from emperors, there were also many great emperors. All the ministries had disciples who were great emperors. In front of the crowd was a valley and a mountain peak. The peak was like a wall with a door inside. That was the Gon Ministry's paradise. At that moment, the door opened, some empty space energy emerged, and everybody heard a voice. You may enter the Gon Ministry's paradise. Everybody's silhouette flickered and they moved towards the door. Lin Feng followed, but remained discreet. Many people were watching for him, but nobody noticed him as he crossed the door. When Lin Feng crossed the deployment door, he reappeared in another world, an ancient realm. A strong cultivator had created this small world. If there hadn't been a door, it would have been impossible to notice that there was a small world there. After entering the small world, Lin Feng saw people moving in different directions. He picked a random direction for himself, but heard the wind sigh behind him. He frowned as he turned around and saw some familiar faces. There was the young man who had warned him about Great Emperor Z. He looked quite ordinary. When people saw him, they ignored him, but Lin Feng could sense that he was quite extraordinary. He had invited Lin Feng to join the Gon Ministry, which meant he was probably the first disciple of the Gon Ministry. We were meant to meet. My name is Yang Xiao. How should I call you, Your Excellency? Asked that person with a friendly smile. We were meant to meet? Thought Lin Feng, but he smiled back and said, Mu Feng. Brother Mu Feng, I know the Gon Ministry's paradise. I've been here before. Would you like to travel with me? Yang Xiao asked Lin Feng. Lin Feng's heart twitched. People who could freely travel to the Gon Ministry's paradise definitely had a special social status. This man could come to the Gon Ministry's paradise as he wished, which meant he had an extraordinary social status within the Gon Ministry. Lin Feng remained silent for a few seconds and then he heard Yang Xiao say, Many great emperors will come here. If you bump into them, things will get complicated for you. If you stay with me, nobody will cause you trouble. Chapter 21-25. Animal Guardian Spirits. Lin Feng had already sensed Emperor Wu Tianjian's sword's life and vitality. However, it had a sword soul, and a sword soul was made out of the cultivator's soul. How could a deployment spell have a soul if a cultivator didn't grant it with a thread of his own soul? Lin Feng didn't understand. Lin Feng destroyed the spider web, despite its strength. He walked towards the spider, however, the spider opened its mandibles, and lights filled the air around him again. The energies looked sharp and deadly. They could easily cut a cultivator apart. But at his cultivation level, blades couldn't even stab him anymore. Lin Feng's hand was sharp, it seemed able to cut anything. It moved forwards, the wind whistled as the lights were cut apart. Lin Feng landed on the spider's back, driving it down to the ground with a crunch. At the same time, Lin Feng's soul strength penetrated into the spider's third eye. As expected, in the spider's brain, there was a thread of light, a spider soul. As expected, deployment beasts also have a soul. However, where does that soul come from? Is it really natural? Lin Feng doubted what the ancestor of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had said. Of course, it was his own impression. There was no precise reason for thinking Yang Xiao was lying. There were many strong cultivators in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Many people had also noticed this, but they didn't question what the ancestors said. After all, in the world of cultivation, there were many things which couldn't be explained. These deployment beasts which were alive were a perfect example. Lin Feng released qi into the air. In an instant, it surrounded the spider and the spider disappeared. Since it had a soul, it could probably be controlled. Lin Feng continued walking forwards. He encountered many deployment beasts. Some of them were very strong and could also cast deployment spells, just like the spider. Those beasts' ability to cast deployment spells seemed to be innate. Lin Feng took all of them without exception. He put them all in his spirit world. He wanted to see if he'd be able to control them. Tomb! Lin Feng looked at the ground from the sky and saw a grave. There was even a gravestone. In front of it, there were deployment beasts protecting it. That's why it drew Lin Feng's attention. Cyan Dragon of the East, White Tiger of the West, Vermilion Bird of the South, Tortoise of the North, he murmured. That place was in the middle of the creatures. For guardian spirits protecting a gravestone, who was buried there. At this time, the four beasts were staring at some people ferociously. Those people were from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry and had come to the small world to practice. They wanted to see what was on that gravestone. Finally, someone moved towards the gravestone, but the white tiger moved to intercept and glared at that person icily. It also released a formidable power. It looked just like a guardian spirit. We're disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. We came to pray for our ancestor. Let us pass, said that strong cultivator. However, the white tiger just looked at him icily. That strong cultivator grunted icily and stretched out his hands. There was a rumble of moving energy and imprints shot towards the white tiger. The white tiger roared angrily and spat out golden lights. Explosions erupted as they met the imprints, and everything exploded. The strong cultivator grunted again and struck out with punches at the white tiger. Energy filled the air. The one who had attacked the white tiger was a great emperor who controlled Dao power, as were the others with him. They were all extremely strong. The white tiger roared, more golden lights materialized. Everything became golden around him. He looked like a king. His golden lights shot in all directions, the earth and sky trembled. Those people's hearts started pounding. They were great scholars, but they couldn't cast deployment spells so quickly. However, that white tiger who was a guardian spirit with innate abilities and extremely strong. It's a great imperial deployment beast, thought the astonished Lin Feng. The white tiger was furious. The golden lights flared and turned into a curtain of light. The great emperor pulled a long face. He kept attacking, but the white tiger was still roaring furiously. Deployment lights filled the air around him, the turning into a vortex and moving towards his enemy. How terrifying! The great emperor isn't as strong as the tiger, observed Lin Feng. The great emperor also thought of casting a deployment spell, but even as deployment lights started intertwining around him, the white tiger was too fast. He roared furiously and continuously. Deployment lights were everywhere. The other great emperors all withdrew, grimacing. They had heard about these powerful guardian spirits before. Everybody had told them to never offend them, but they had always had doubts. Now they could see them with their own eyes. "Should we help him?" asked one of them as their faces stiffened. That great emperor was stuck in a deployment cage now. "Haven't you seen that the three other guardian spirits are eyeing us covetously?" answered one of them, watching the cyan dragon, the tortoise, and the vermilion bird carefully. The three guardian spirits were all extremely strong, watching the three as if they wanted to devour them. "Help me!" shouted the great emperor desperately. To his despair, nobody was helping him. The deployment spell was getting more and more terrifying. The great emperor's hope was evaporating. Finally, the white tiger devoured him alive. The sight was quite fearsome, especially when the white tiger with blood dripping from his jaws raised his head and looked at them. Phew! Lin Feng took a deep breath. How strong! What would have happened if I had been the great emperor? 4 guardian spirits, Saint Imperial marks, inherited from the great deployment master. "You dared try?" said Yang Shao, looking at those people indifferently. "Even though we're in the Gone Ministry's paradise, there are no rules saying we can't do certain things. If we're able to do something, does anything prevent us from doing so?" Someone else replied to Yang Shao. "If they hadn't found the grave, never mind, but they did, and it was protected by terrifying guardian spirits. Few people could compete with them. The problem is, can you defeat them?" Yang Shao smiled coldly, which made those people pull long faces. Their friend had just been killed. It proved everything. Hee hee, Yang Shao, no need to tell us those things. If you had had the opportunity, you would have done the same. Everybody knows what kind of person you are in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, returned that person with a knowing smile. Everybody agreed. Even the 9 supreme ministries had told their direct disciples not to touch him. "Huh, you understand me." Yang Shao burst into laughter and said, "You're right, if I have the opportunity, I'll kill the guardian spirits, and now I do have that opportunity. When they heard him, they frowned. Yang Xiao, what do you mean? I can deal with them if you all help me, replied Yang Xiao. And then, asked the crowd. They had always wanted to see what was hidden in that grave. Before, you must help me do something, said Yang Xiao. What? Asked the cultivators, frowning. That guy was shameless. Help me capture that guy, said Yang Xiao, pointing at Lin Feng. Everybody looked at Lin Feng, not understanding. Wasting so much energy to capture an emperor? And he needed help for that? Lin Feng frowned and his eyes twinkled icily. Yang Xiao was definitely treacherous. He wanted to capture Lin Feng now. Yang Xiao, there are no tensions between you and me, and you even invited me to join the Gone Ministry. Is that how you treat your friends? Replied Lin Feng icily, staring at Yang Xiao. He opened his hand and deployment marks appeared. Your Excellency, I think you won't accept my invitation, so I'll capture you first and then we can talk. Yang Xiao smiled. Lin Feng suddenly turned into a beam of light and shot off into the distance. Die! Shouted Great Emperor Z icily. He released Fire Dao power, which struck Lin Feng and penetrated into his body. Lin Feng was furious when he sensed the qi latch hold of him. If you want to go into the grave, capture him, shouted Yang Xiao explosively as he started chasing Lin Feng. The crowd frowned. Their silhouettes flickered. They all chased after Lin Feng like madmen. Since Yang Xiao had told them to, they obeyed. He might even keep his promise. Lin Feng released empty space and wind cosmic energies and modified them. At the same time, his spirit world qi filled the air and gigantic wings appeared on his back. He beat them and streaked across the sky. He was moving at an incredible speed. How fast? Yang Xiao remains vigilant. He joined hands with me, but surprisingly he asked some great emperors to help him. He hadn't thought this guy would be so fast, thought Great Emperor Z when he saw that. However, deployment marks appeared under his feet and he started moving through empty spaces. Chapter 21-26, Killing God. Yang Xiao was extremely fast. Deployment lights appeared under his feet and he started moving. He caught up with Great Emperor Z and they continued chasing Lin Feng. When Great Emperor Z heard the whistling sounds next to him, he fumed. People from the Gone Ministry are good to Yang Xiao. They know he always resorts to evil methods, so they gave him a precious treasure to escape. Yang Xiao was one of the two emperors who had the highest social status in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. His social status was higher than Yi Kei's or Xiamao's. Of course, he was stronger than them, too. He had an extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. He wasn't greedy, quite even-tempered, and he also remained discreet most of the time. He obtained things all the time from all the ministries because he was talented. He could steal people's memories and use them for himself. When he took someone's memories, the victim became amnesic and stupid. In the past, there had been many cases in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Some extremely strong people had lost memories. Yang Xiao didn't care about weak people's memories. At the beginning, nobody knew who had done it. Eventually people had found out that it was Yang Xiao, but the Gone Ministry protected him. They had given him a treasure which protected his life, so nobody could do anything to him. However, similar things continued happening and the Supreme Ministries were infuriated and wanted to punish him. They even threatened to kill him if he touched their disciples' memories. Yang Xiao had finally stopped hunting the disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. When Yang Xiao saw Lin Feng, he had immediately thought of him as a prey. He wanted to steal Lin Feng's memories. It was a terrifying skill, especially since Lin Feng was extremely strong. Stealing such people's memories had made Yang Xiao extremely strong. Because of his special power, it was difficult for people of the same cultivation level to resist him, even though he wasn't very talented. Only one person who had an innate spiritual deployment-type body could compete with him. That person's power was similar to the legendary cultivator's power who had created the deployment mines with deployment spiritual beings. It was an innate power. It was difficult to find such people in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and his deployment spells were awesome. That person was the first emperor of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Many great emperors were weaker than him. Lin Feng's speed was terrifying. However, Yang Xiao was catching up with him. Red lights shot towards Lin Feng. He frowned and turned around suddenly. World of the living imprints flashed towards Yang Xiao. It was like heaven and earth were surrounding him. Yang Xiao had nowhere to escape. Yang Xiao released deployment lights around himself and disappeared. He reappeared above Lin Feng. Lin Feng's eyes became pitch black and deathly cold. His death intent was intense. Holy spirits filled with cursing strength moved towards Yang Xiao, pulsing with power. At the same time, Lin Feng shouted furiously, sound waves and cursing strength invaded Yang Xiao's mind. At the same time, Lin Feng raised his hands and blocked the red lights. Lin Feng released explosive deployment marks and appeared in front of Yang Xiao. Terrifying cosmic energies emitted furious whistling sounds and oppressed Yang Xiao. Sword light streaked across the sky and a dazzling sword trail appeared, able to cut and destroy anything. Block! Yang Xiao suddenly turned into a void, a strong wind started blowing and energies rolled out around him. He disappeared and reappeared in front of Lin Feng again. Terrifying lights emerged from his third eye and shot towards Lin Feng's brain, accompanied by a dangerous qi. Lin Feng felt his thoughts start to unsettle. He suddenly had a headache and the impression his brain was going to explode. His soul also started to shake chaotically. Die! Death strength moved towards his enemy's brain. Both of them had terrifying attacks, and both controlled deployment spells. Their attacks were cruel and brutal. Anyone else could have been easily killed by their attacks. A terrifying strength moved towards Lin Feng. He raised his hands to block, and Yang Xiao had the impression a mountain had fallen onto his back. He could barely breathe, and felt he was going to explode. Deployment lights emerged from his body and he retreated. He was thinking that he was right. Lin Feng was indeed extremely talented, a real genius. In the celestial remarkable deployment ministry, there weren't many people like him. He might be as strong as the one who had a spiritual deployment body. Yang Xiao wanted to steal his memories even more. Great Emperor Z and the others finally caught up with him. Great Emperor Z stretched his hands and a terrifying fire surrounded Lin Feng. It felt like his entire body was going to burn. Stop! Behind him, deployment lights started intertwining. A cage appeared and imprisoned him. Everybody smiled coldly. He wanted to escape from them, but it wasn't that easy. However, they saw Lin Feng jump up. He raised his shining fist, smashed the cage, and blew it apart instantly. Then he took out a deployment talisman and he disappeared, reappearing far in the distance. What kind of materials did he use to carve such a deployment talisman? He can surprisingly teleport so far. Yang Xiao and the others were astonished and all pulled long faces. Surprisingly, he had escaped. Chase him, shouted Yang Xiao icily. He was extremely fast. Deployment lights surrounded him again. He disappeared once more. Lin Feng's speed was terrifying. He used deployment talismans, knowing he wasn't strong enough to deal with so many great emperors. Yang Xiao had asked them to chase him, not the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, but the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry couldn't say anything to protect him. Lin Feng had come to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry willing to take risks. Now it was even worse. He was in the Gone Ministry's paradise. He had anticipated he would run into danger. He just hadn't thought it would happen so fast. Lin Feng realized that he couldn't escape from Yang Xiao. Yang Xiao shouted extremely loudly, "Help me stop that guy, I'll be infinitely grateful." Many people heard him clearly far away in the distance and rushed over. Lin Feng saw someone rush over to him. He welcomed the man with a sword attack. The sword lights were dazzling and hurt that guy's eyes as it turned into a gigantic beam of light. Lin Feng then used another deployment talisman and disappeared. However, some people were still blocking him. A strong cultivator released ancient imprints onwards him. At the same time, Dao power moved into his body. He grunted with pain, infuriated. "Anyone who tries to stop me will die," shouted Lin Feng explosively, the earth and sky trembling. 9 dragons roared. At the same time, a violent qi exploded out from him. It was a weapon king qi, terrifying and indestructible. Lin Feng seemed to be able to conquer every obstacle. He flapped his gigantic deployment wings unceasingly and streaked across the sky. Someone was staring at him as he tried to block Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked back at him icily. He used his Nihility Sword Scripture's attack and released an empty space death sword, simultaneously releasing other sword energies. His enemy didn't have time to be stupefied. He instantly disappeared, dead and gone. Ordinary emperors of the top of the Huang Qi layer couldn't withstand a single attack from him. Lin Feng didn't stop moving. Someone in front of him released ice-cold lights. His death strength turned into a long river. At the same time, millions of black death swords appeared. His world of the living imprints blotted out the sky. Lin Feng's enemy had the impression he was going to drown. He tried to escape from Lin Feng, but those death energies absorbed him completely. When the crowd in the distance saw that, they were astonished. In the blink of an eye, Lin Feng had already killed 5 or 6 people, everyone who had tried to stop him. "How insolent!" swore a great emperor, darting forwards and releasing his qi. He threw himself at Lin Feng, condensing endless strength. The terrifying qi blotted out the sky. In Lin Feng's eyes there was only coldness and death. People chased him to kill him? Then he had to kill them. If his soul and physical body hadn't been strong enough, he would have been dead long ago. Die! Lin Feng looked like a death god. Nothing could distract him. He threw himself at the qi which the great emperor was condensing and released qi himself. He looked like a sharp sword. "Stay here!" shouted the great emperor, stepping forwards. The ground was shaking. A strong wind was blowing, strong enough to kill people. However, when he released that explosive qi, Lin Feng disappeared and released his shadow spirit. His whole body turned into a blurry shadow and he moved even faster. The wind was still moaning. Something moved through it with a whistle of doom. The terrifying qi made the earth and sky tremble. The great emperor stopped running forwards, his face stiffening. Yang Shao streaked across the sky, a hurricane appearing around him. He frowned because he saw the great emperor turn into blood and ashes suddenly. Yang Zhao's heart started pounding, but he wanted Lin Feng's memories even more. The more dangerous Lin Feng was, the more interesting he was. He wanted to obtain Lin Feng's powers. Chapter 2136. Traveling together. Lin Feng watched those people leave and smiled indifferently. The members of the Pellet King's clan weren't easy to talk to, especially since they were furious because of that previous defeat. But most people were probably like that in Godly Cloud City. The strong cultivators from Red Clouds were also proud and arrogant, but they didn't provoke people first. They weren't at home after all. The strong cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan hadn't left yet. A young man from Red Clouds looked at him and said, "Your Excellency, don't worry, that guy resorted to trickery and used hidden fire. It's normal if you're injured. In terms of pure physical strength, you are much better." "Yes, I understand. But be careful too. Wang Xing is sly." "It won't be easy in 3 days," replied the cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan. The young people from Red Clouds nodded. The one who had just talked smiled happily and said, "Even though the Pellet King's clan is based in Godly Cloud City, we are also descendants of medical kings. We don't fear them. Since we won against them once, we can win twice." The Thunder Clan cultivator nodded and looked at Lin Feng. "You just refused to trade your beast with Wang Sheng. Even though he said nothing, you have to be careful. He will probably dispatch people to steal it from you. He loves fire beasts. After all, he could use a fire-type Great Imperial Beast to modify its fire and use it himself." "Thank you for warning me," Lin Feng replied politely. Those people from Red Clouds looked at Lin Feng and smiled. "Your Excellency, are you a foreigner too?" Lin Feng nodded. "I'm from the Dark Knight region." "Great, we've already been recommended to an ancient holy clan. If you want to take part in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, you can come with us," said the leader of the group with an open smile. When Lin Feng heard that, he understood what the other meant and smiled too. He didn't refuse. Finding a place to stay was a good thing. He could also inform his fellow disciples. Being recommended to a place was great too. And these people seemed nice. Staying with other people was a good idea considering some people could attack him anytime. Great, I'd love to, Lin Feng agreed. Alright, let's go then, that man grinned. The 5 of them left together. My name is Ru Feng, what's your name? The leader of the group asked. Lin Feng. My name is Ru Yun. Ziling. My name is Yao Yao. The youngest woman of the group kept staring at Lin Feng and grinning. Actually, she kept looking at Lin Feng's fire lion. Her beautiful eyes were twinkling as she said, I want to steal your fire lion too. His fire makes the atmosphere so cozy. Brother Lin Feng, your clan is so nice to you. They gave you a cute great imperial beast. Lin Feng realized how nice and easygoing these people were. If you like him, you can have him, no problem.